So I imagine I, like most Williams students, knew that Williams was probably doing something for sustainability, but wasn't necessarily interested or took the time to learn about what those precise things were. And now that I've been an intern for the past 2 months, I've learned so much about what the school does.
The Zilkha Center is the campus sustainability office, so charged with decreasing the carbon footprint at the college and making the college more sustainable.
So the college has greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals for 2020. The goals are two-part. One is the 35% below 1990 levels, and then purchase of carbon offsets to meet full carbon neutrality.
I think these 2020 goals help to crystallize action needs to be taken. We need to do it now. We need to have some tough conversations. So recently, this past spring, there was a collaborative approach with colleges in the Northeast, Smith, Amherst, Hampshire, and Bowdoin, to invest in a solar facility in Farmington, Maine, that would provide 80 to 90% of our purchased electricity.
Carbon offsets are a really interesting idea. The theory behind them is that the planet doesn't care where emissions reductions happen, and that 1 ton of carbon saved here is just as good for climate as 1 ton of carbon reduced somewhere else. And there are various of us who worry about a new type of colonization, essentially, where instead of trying to extract natural resources from the developing world, we're trying to push our carbon reduction needs onto the developing world. Williams will be purchasing carbon offsets in order to meet our 2020 goals. We are certainly committed to it in the short term, but not necessarily in the medium or long term.
So as you look at our emissions increase over the last 17 years, a lot of that is due to buildings. So a lot of the changes, the proposed changes that we're now acting on, are thinking about efficiency with buildings. For the Garfield house, the decision was made to knock that building down and build a new one, meaning that if you kept the old building up and let it operate status quo, or if you knocked down the building, built a new one, taking into consideration all the carbon, it would take 4.5 years to get your return on investment. And then everything after that would be sort of money in the bank, so to speak.
The activism around divestment, for example, really brought attention to the issue in a way that wouldn't have happened without that student activism and student engagement.
So when I became most involved in divestment was my senior year here at Williams. The urgency was building. The following fall, at that point I was no longer on campus, that's when we received the response.
At that time, our administration said, well, that's not the path that we want to pursue. It really helped move the conversation along. I mean, Board of Trustees members and the president, I mean, everyone was paying attention to that conversation. You know, heading into the future, how will that conversation change? Will it change? I also think that engaging students in deep conversations about various aspects of what we do is exciting.
Divest Williams is something that's really interesting conceptually as a student. I wasn't involved in it, but it demonstrates that students really do have the ability to steer the policy agenda of the school to even the highest level.
If we're able to create institutional change, we don't have to be spending every day of our time doing that thing.
We are charged with pushing the institution, and we are also part of the institution, right? And so we would have interesting discussions, recognizing the fact that the college may not be ready for something like that. And maybe down the road it would be ready for something like that.
I'm really interested in dancing, and whenever I dance, I put it on my Instagram and I want to share it with people, but obviously not everyone cares about dancing in the way that I do. The interesting thing about sustainability is, even if you aren't interested in it, it's still something that affects you whether you know it or not. And I think for that reason, it's very important to at least become aware of it and educate yourself about it. I think the kindest thing that you can do to yourself is just be open to learning.